Hi, my name's Mick Napier, and I'm a founder member of the Scottish Palestine Solidarity Campaign 20 odd years ago. I've just watched scenes from the US Congress and also from the Westminster Parliament, and it's truly horrific to see this collection of people who have supported massive war crimes, crimes against humanity, for so many years, uh, pretending to be in support and solidarity with the people of Ukraine. There's no such thing. Through the fog of war, it's difficult sometimes to see the truth, but let's cling to what we absolutely know. In England, you have a choice of three parties who are pro-NATO. Up here in Scotland, we have four, all of them pro-NATO. What strikes me in this situation is the media discipline. Not only have I not seen a considered argument against the war, but we haven't even been allowed to know that very prominent statesmen, people I would condemn for all sorts of reasons, but advisors to US governments and British governments, British ambassadors, have been warning for many years that getting Ukraine into NATO would very likely precipitate a war with Russia, and warning about this monumental stupidity which has now been carried out by NATO, driven forward, of course, by the USA and Britain. But it is a monumental stupidity. Listen to the voices of the UK ambassador, Sir Roderick Lynes, and he said over a decade ago, bringing Ukraine into NATO is stupid on every level. If you want to start a war with Russia, that's the best way of doing it. Moreover, any poll in Ukraine showed that 2/3 of the Ukrainian public did not want NATO membership. And that's one voice, but many others could be brought forward. The question is, why are these opinions not appearing in the media? Why is it such a disciplined drumbeat to war? Why has Tony Blair not appeared beating the drum for war? Could it be that his very appearance would alert millions to what happened last time when we were lied to by the government, lied to by the media, lied to at every level to push the war with Iraq against a massive section of public opinion? Try an experiment. Ask anybody in your family or your friends who are not very political why Britain got involved in World War One. 40 million dead. But ask people what they think the war was for, and you'll get people will be nonplussed. They don't know the reason. And of course, World War Two, 70 million dead, was precipitated because Britain and the victors pillaged the defeated Germany at the Versailles Peace Treaty and made a follow-up war very likely indeed. So here again, we're at the gates of war, and we're told that it's evil Putin who's responsible. He certainly bears his share of responsibility for what's going on in the Ukraine. But Putin was actually supported when he crushed the rebellion against his rule in Chechnya, where the capital Grozny was left with hardly one brick standing on another. Putin was given a green light for that. There was no protest at all from the West. So it's clearly nothing to do with his human rights record or his record of crimes against popular rebellions and oppressed nationalities. Nothing like it. It's clearly something else. Those of us who've been involved in Palestine solidarity know that the UK and the USA have facilitated the most grotesque crimes against the people of Palestine. The UNHCR says Israel was recently killing children and health workers and journalists, knowing they were children, knowing they were health workers, knowing that they were journalists. The chief military rabbi in Israel, guy called, I forget his name, Eyal, somebody. But he's on record as endorsing rape of comely Gentile women, i.e. Palestinians, if it sustains the soldiers' morale. He later apologised and said he was misquoted, as do lots of people like Trump and so on. One Palestinian prisoner who resisted the illegal occupation and attacked soldiers is now in his 40th year of incarceration in Israeli dungeons. Mandela did 22, and the world gasps when you mention such a number. But we have here in Britain a Tory government of liars and thieves, corrupt crooks who've given hundreds of millions in contracts to their friends and chums and owners of local bars. And now they're whooping for joy when the Ukrainian ambassador came to the Westminster Parliament, I think yesterday. Why didn't even one person ask him? Why wasn't he subjected to a single question? Why are black people trying to escape with other Ukrainians, escape the war as people naturally do to get to Poland? Why are black people being turned away from the buses? Why is it white people who are selected to proceed to safety and black Africans and brown people who are being selected to just go away and possibly face acute danger in a war zone? This is disgusting. This is beyond disgusting. And surely there's a connection between these tactics and the atrocities of war in the East, where the Russians have been certainly carrying out war crimes. But so have the Ukrainians. And one of the battalions fighting in the East against the Russian speakers, not Russia, but Russian speakers in Ukraine, is the Azov battalion. Explicit, open, proud neo-Nazis who haven't been put in jail. They have been given arms and become part of the Ukrainian army. Now that doesn't make you a Putin fan. Don't hand me a white feather. I'm not a pacifist. I believe in people fighting back. But it should not be brushed under the carpet, and people should discuss it and be allowed to discuss it. But the area for discussion of this war is being restricted. You're either entirely for NATO and the 3 parties in England and the 4 parties in Scotland which support NATO, or you're a Putin admirer. No, absolutely not. It's possible to oppose both sides of a bloody war, as decent people did in World War I. Opposed German militarism and opposed British militarism as well. We revere John Maclean in Glasgow, who adopted that position, a very much minority position during the years of World War I, and suffered grievously for that position. But now we see Starmer joining with that wretched Johnson to push confrontation with Russia. And suddenly we have an outbreak of boycott. The Edinburgh Festival, which damned us, Scottish Palestine Solidarity Campaign, for driving, for protesting against Israeli state-sponsored troops, now have kicked out somebody from their board because he's got some Russian connection. And in London, and Russian cats have been banned by the international feline body. So Russian cats. Wakefield has cancelled a production of Swan Lake in Croatia and elsewhere around the world. Anything with a Russian author or Russian performers is apparently deemed appropriate material for censorship. Look, even if you don't accept that this government of Britain is a criminal government, supported NATO to commit dreadful crimes in Afghanistan, alienated the local people to such a degree that they even preferred the Taliban to the wretched kleptocracy that Britain and the rest of NATO had forced upon them. Corrupt elections, brutality, torture, a very dark history that nobody can defend. And a few weeks after this, we are led to believe that the perpetrators of crimes in Afghanistan are carrying out a noble role in Ukraine. Actually, they'll fight to the last Ukrainian in order to try to defeat Russia. That's the reality. And what we need is a neutral Ukraine, prosperous like Switzerland or Sweden, but a neutral Ukraine out of NATO. We need Scotland out of NATO as well. And anybody who actually looks at the record of NATO in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Libya, and in Serbia and elsewhere will know that this is not a club you want to be a member of. So don't just look at the mote in Putin's eye. Let's look at the beam in NATO's eye. NATO, of which we are a member, has a record of criminal rapacity and enables Israel to commit the most atrocious crimes against the Palestinian people. I'm looking at a photograph here. It says this is not Hiroshima, this is Gaza. It's on my TV screen. You can easily look it up. Terrible crimes against the people of Palestine. Terrible. The siege of Gaza is a crime. And you know, the same people who are dancing about Ukrainian freedom, supposedly, are exactly the same people who've facilitated Israel's crimes against the Palestinian people. Grotesque ethnic cleansing, bulldozing of homes, torture, Amnesty says, is endemic in the Israeli prison system. In fact, Palestinians are the most incarcerated people on the surface of the globe. And Britain and America facilitate these crimes. How can you be a rapist in one part of town and a social worker in the other? It's ridiculous. And we need to fight, not just for the Palestinians, not just for the people of Ukraine, not just for the Russian people who are bravely standing up against Putin and whom we honour. But we honour them not by supporting militarism here, but by fighting our own militarism inspired by their doing the same thing in cities across the whole of Russia. Friends, if you're not prepared to move to prevent crimes against other people, think about this. Margaret Thatcher in 1982 was the most unpopular Prime Minister in British history. She whipped up a jingo war in the South Atlantic. Rather than negotiate, rather than simply discuss with the Argentine junta, the Argentine government at that time, sadly, but rather than negotiate, she went on a war footing. Negotiations out, nuclear submarines in. And the left-wing leader of the Labour Party at that time, Michael Foot, outdid Thatcher in calling for more military action in the Falklands. So Starmer, of course, isn't a new kind of degenerate Labour Party leader when he backs up Johnson. But if you don't fight this, we'll be forging chains for our own wrists, because Thatcher bounced back on a jingoistic outburst to smash the miners, to take this country back decades, to deindustrialise big chunks of Scotland and England. And if Johnson, the wretched, lying, corrupt lowlife that he is, who treats us with utter contempt, partying while people across Britain can't touch their loved ones before they die, if this wretch gets away with another burst of jingoism and militarism, sending weapons to Ukraine to confront Russia by proxy, we will be making a stick to break our own back, and we'll suffer for a very long time. Fight this surge to war by proxy and war as if your life depended upon it, as if your children's welfare depended upon it, because they do. We need to discuss, we need to talk, we need to ask questions, but it's a very grim time. We have the Labour Party, that indistinguishable from Union Jack waving Johnson, Corbyn sidelined, has no influence that can be discerned. The Labour left have collapsed and refused to support Stop the War. Here in Scotland, the Friends of Israel, who support every Israeli massacre, every bloody crime, I'm not swearing, bloody crime, Palestinian blood seeping into the ground. This group will be marching in Glasgow if they wish. They marched in previous years in an anti-racism march. But racism stems from empire. Racism and militarism go together. You can't fight one without fighting the other. And the struggle against British militarism needs to be firm, principled, and unyielding. Friends, I don't know all the answers, but one of them is a neutral Ukraine, democratic, independent of NATO and of Russia. What's happening in Ukraine to a degree is a civil war with all sorts of formations in the field, but one of them certainly is the extreme right mobilised against Russian speakers. I don't say it's tidy, it's very messy indeed. Thanks for listening. Take care.